So people are probably still, we'll get a few more to log in, but let me go ahead and start with the introduction, Sunny, and we'll go from there. And let me actually record also on my computer. So welcome all to All Life is Yoga, which is hosted by the LaGrasse Integral Life Center here in Fountain Inn, South Carolina. And we thank you for joining us as we continue our exploration into Ayurveda, which is an ancient approach to health and well-being that originated in India. And today we have with us Sunny Rose Haley. We welcome you, Sunny, and so very nice to have you with us. And Sunny studied Ayurveda under Dr. Vasant Lad at the Ayurvedic Institute in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and later became a faculty member at the same institute. She is an Ayurvedic practitioner, has her own Ayurvedic medicine practice, and also herbal company in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So during this hour-long webinar, Sunny will introduce us to the concept of Dinacharya, which is a powerful Ayurvedic tool, and she'll explain the benefits of following a personal Dinacharya, not only to support our physical health, but as well our emotional, mental, and even spiritual well-being. So if you have questions for Sunny during this intensive, feel free to type in the Q&A box your questions, and we will have time towards the end for Sunny to address them. So again, welcome, Sunny. We are very much looking forward to your talk this evening. I know you have prepared a very nice presentation to walk us through. But before that, many of our attendees may be new to Ayurveda, and I'm wondering if you could just take a few minutes and explain Ayurveda's approach to health and well-being and what makes this ancient healing system unique.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here, and hi everyone. Ayurveda literally means the science of life, and it came about as its sister sciences of yoga, Jyotish, which is Vedic astrology, Vastu, which is the art of placement, and all the sister sciences coming from the Vedas as a result of yogis, rishis, which means seer, in deep meditation, witnessing the nature of reality. And then Ayurveda was practiced over hundreds, even thousands of years, and so taken into daily life and practiced over a very long period of time in the family setting and also doctor to student, doctor to patient. So it's an ancient system. Many of us are familiar with Chinese medicine, and many see Ayurveda as the mother of Chinese medicine. It's a 5-element system like Chinese medicine is, and it really works deeply with the principle of as above, so below. So as the universal, so the human being. And so it's like the universe exists all inside one human being. And so each human being is very important. Each human being has their own unique makeup of these 5 elements. So we're all made of the same stuff, but we manifest that stuff, if you will, in very different ways. And so treating the individual and working with the individual is incredibly important to Ayurveda and to the Vedic sciences. So this is wonderful because it's not one size fits all. You never have to ask the question, okay, should I be doing this, and all these things that I'm seeing everywhere, people telling me I should do that, because you always have an idea and a way to know. Once you get to know yourself and get to know some of the basic principles of Ayurveda, you have a roadmap for how you can decide if each thing that you're seeing out in the world may or may not be the right thing for you. So it's wonderful in that way.
Great, and that was a great overview and introduction to Ayurveda. Probably one of the best that I've heard, Sunny, in your short time of a couple minutes to introduce Ayurveda. You and I were classmates at Dr. Lad's Ayurvedic Institute back in 2007, 2008. So many, many years ago, at least it seems. And today, very few people, even now in the US, have heard about Ayurveda. And certainly back then, there were even fewer. So I'm very curious and interested to hear as to how at that time you were drawn to Ayurveda, and not only to study it, but you ended up then instructing at the institute after you graduated, and now you live a life consistent with Ayurveda, and you share your knowledge and wisdom with others, and teaching them how to practice and live an Ayurvedic lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting how I was drawn into Ayurveda, but I believe it's really because I was experiencing a lot of illness in my life. And through experiencing illness and looking for ways that were really beyond my relationship with my MD, which were really not serving me for the kind of sort of chronic things that I had going on, I found yogasana. I found yoga and yogic teachings, and that was an amazing part of my recovery and kind of transition into learning how to manage my own health. And then through yoga, because it is a sister science of Ayurveda, I one day came upon Ayurveda and I just thought, wow, this is a whole universe in this packed little book that I'm looking at. And what an amazing thing. And I knew that one day I would study Ayurveda. And it took me probably 10 years after that moment to make my way to the Ayurvedic Institute in 2007 and find Dr. Ladd and begin to study Ayurveda. But before that, I had been interested in searching and looking into ways of holistic healing. And really, the idea for me was, how can I be my own doctor? How can I be my own physician on a day-to-day basis, right? Because we can't really have someone with us all the time. We need to learn how to take care of ourselves, even if we do have the support of other professionals at times, right? So that was really what began that process for me. And it was really, for me, it felt like divine guidance that I found Dr. Ladd.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing that. And I know that you'd like to show us a wonderful presentation you've prepared on Dinacharya. So I will let you go ahead and screen share whenever you're ready, Sunny. And again, for the attendees that are joining, any questions you have, just put in the Q&A box, and Sunny will get to them towards the end.
Yes, please share your questions. I would love to answer and dialogue with you. Here we go, screen share. Okay. Bear with me while I get this to go full screen.
No problem.
Okay, and let me know if you can see everything.
It's perfect.
Okay, great. Okay, so this is an introduction to Dinacharya, and I'll be talking about what that is. And I like to call this the art and science of harnessing time for self-transformation. A little bit about me. Now, we already kind of went through this, but my teacher is Vaidya, Dr. Vasant Ladd of the Ayurvedic Institute in Albuquerque. And I also want to say, just as a special introduction to this particular topic, that I'm also a mother and I have a busy practice and I own a couple of companies. So I really know what it's like to be a busy person working to maintain balance and to really prioritize self-care. So when you learn about Dinacharya with me, I don't want you to be thinking, okay, that's great if I have all day, because you really can integrate this into any life. And when you do take the time to learn these principles and practice this in your life, it will actually really benefit your busy lifestyle and your family by extension. So we're starting with looking at circadian science. The Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine was awarded actually for circadian medicine discoveries. And I really like to lead in with that because it tells us how important this discovery in modern times is, of course, something that was known anciently. So in 2017, the Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine was awarded to Jeffrey Hall, Michael Rosbash, and Michael Young for their discoveries of the molecular mechanisms that control circadian rhythms. Chronobiology, and this is language taken directly from the Nobel Prize, you know, what was written about these guys and what they were doing. Chronobiology has an impact on many aspects of our physiology. For example, circadian clocks help to regulate sleep patterns, feeding behavior, hormone release, blood pressure, and body temperature. So we can see here, and this is also a graphic from the Nobel Prize presentation, You can see the clock of the day overlaid over a body. You can see, for example, that highest alertness is about 9 a.m. and highest body temperature is about 6 p.m. Cortisol release happens about 6 a.m. So there are these endogenous systems and functions built in to us as human beings. And of course, this is also observed in animals and plants as well. Studies have indicated that chronic misalignment between our lifestyle and the rhythm dictated by our endogenous circadian clock may be associated with increased risk for various diseases, including cancer, neurodegenerative diseases, metabolic disorders, and inflammation. Amazing, right? So now we get to Ayurveda's contribution to circadian science. Ayurveda has understood the importance of alignment between lifestyle and our human endogenous circadian clock for thousands of years. Let's get into what Dinacharya is. Dina means day, and Charya means movement, routine, lifestyle, or practices. So according to Ayurveda, Dinacharya is a very important aspect of bringing happiness, joy, and balance into daily life. It affects body, of course, which we were just talking about, but it also affects mind and consciousness because according to Ayurveda, these are inseparable. Body, mind, consciousness, body, mind, spirit is a trinity. So anytime we affect one, we affect the other. So Dinacharya can strengthen mind and immunity as well. It's beneficial for all constitutions. We haven't talked about constitutions yet. So if you're new to Ayurveda, just allow me to say that the 5 elements make us all up. And as I mentioned, we have different proportions. We separate these into doshas called Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. Okay, there are 3. And we all have all 3 within us. And we can all benefit really amazingly from Dinacharya. But a Vata predominant constitution is mostly ether and air. And that's a person who tends to be very creative and maybe tend to kind of go with the wind, so to speak, right? So Dinacharya is particularly powerful for somebody who has either a Vata predominant constitution or is working with Vata imbalance because it really imparts structure. I would say that for the most part, the people I see in practice either have a Vata predominant constitution, maybe not quite so many as have a Pitta constitution, but most people I see these days actually have some amount of Vata imbalance because Vata does tend to go out of balance so easily. So we can really all benefit from Dinacharya to support our Vata dosha. We benefit and thrive from following the rhythms and cycles of nature and tuning ourselves to those cycles as much as possible rather than creating our own artificial time. So, how do we create artificial time? Well, we turn the lights on when it gets dark. That's one way. So I'm not suggesting that we don't use any of that, but that we just notice the sun is coming up, sun is going down, and we can tune our practices and rhythms to that more and more and really start to notice where's the sun right now, where's the moon right now. And when we tune into those, it really supports our natural balance. Daily routine provides structure and support so we don't have to make so many choices every single day. This is huge. This helps to eliminate decision fatigue. Decision fatigue is a real thing. You can look up studies on decision fatigue. So what is decision fatigue? It's when you walk into a store and there's, you want strawberry jam and there's 30 types of strawberry jam. And it's like, oh, what do I do? And this can happen to us during the day as well. We're looking around going, okay, should I do that first or should I do this first? If we have a plan in place, we don't have to think about it so much, right? Of course, we want to be able to keep our decision-making faculties strong, but at the same time, we don't want to constantly be having to make a decision every 5 minutes. So this really helps that process. Our bodies and minds naturally tend to fall into habit patterns. So you've probably noticed that if you have a particular drink every morning, particular drink every evening, maybe you eat, exercise, and work at the same time each day, maybe you're used to staying up late each night, you tend to fall into the habit of those things and keep doing them. And you might even find it's uncomfortable to stop. Like if you drink tea every morning or coffee every morning and suddenly you try to take that away, it's uncomfortable at first. So that's a natural part of being human. And it takes concerted effort or replacement often to stop something that's become habit. And it even feels irritating or painful when we try to break that habit. So just as habits can be detrimental, like if I, have a whole pot of coffee every morning, that might not be the best thing for me, but I can also use that tendency to want to create habit and patterns to huge benefit. So that's one of the things we really take advantage of when we build our Dinacharya. Okay, so I want to also talk about the principle of like increases like, because this really comes into play when we're looking at, choosing what we'll be doing with Dinacharya. So based on this principle of like increasing like and opposite balancing, we're guided to choose practices, foods, etc., that is based on bringing or maintaining balance. So we can look at things like the season, the climate, the time of day, the individual constitution, like I just mentioned, etc., and choosing what brings balance for us. So on this idea, I have a little diagram here for you of the seasons and the times of day and how they relate to what we call guna, which means quality. So you can see right here on the outside, or let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 rows in, just on the outside of that graphic, we have the qualities that predominate in the various seasons and in the doshas. Okay, so this is a fun one. You can look at this more in your own time. If you come to the intensive, we'll go into this deeply. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Okay, so let's talk about creating your own Dinacharya. I found that the best way to implement a new Dinacharya or to add new pieces is little by little. So with this idea of trying to create new habits that are beneficial, you might want to just add one thing at a time, or maybe 2 things at a time. And you know yourself, what can I handle? How does it feel when I change 1 new thing or 2 new things at a time? When you change 1 thing at a time, for example, you can become part of your life before you add something new, which absolutely eliminates overwhelm. So it's really important to start slow and allow each piece to settle into your life before adding a bunch of new things. As you learn to work with Dinacharya, you'll learn to adjust the Dinacharya seasonally and depending on what needs balance right now. So this becomes an art in your life. So an example of changing things in the season, you might have a hot bath in your Dinacharya for winter, and that feels natural, right? It's cold. A hot bath feels very natural, but in summer, it doesn't feel so natural. So you still have to shower or bathe. Maybe it's warm, or maybe it's even cool. And where you have indoor exercise and certain types of foods in the late fall, in the late spring, you might have something lighter for foods, right? Because naturally that's a time that the body wants to have a little cleansing. And perhaps you'll be outside for exercise, okay? In the winter, you might wake later, but in the summer, you'll probably awaken earlier because the sun is up earlier. So you're just really following the natural rhythms in that way. Okay, we're gonna go into the elements of a strong Dinacharya, but I just wanted to ask, Rade, are there any questions before I go into this next section here?
I don't see anything in the Q&A, but if any of the attendees have a question, just put in the chat real quick, and we'll open your mic.
Okay.
Okay, I think we're good.
Okay, we're good. So I want to talk about the elements of a strong Dinacharya. According to Ayurveda, it's ideal to awaken before sunrise. If this is difficult, you try to go to bed earlier, right? So if you're used to going to bed at midnight, it might feel difficult to awaken before sunrise, but if you go to bed at 10, it's certainly much easier. So you might have to make some adjustments. Getting up before sunrise is an ideal time to eliminate wastes because this is Vata time of day and things tend to move more during Vata time of day. It's also an ideal time to meditate because Vata's lightness facilitates easy meditation. It's a very quiet time especially because not everybody's up yet. And I don't just mean in your own home, you can actually feel that quality in the atmosphere of just that quietness. So this time also helps us to attune to the natural rhythms. Pre-dawn is considered to be a magical time, which is why saints and sages always rise early for meditation and contemplation. So going into the constitutional part of this, a Vata person might awaken just before sunrise because they tend to need a little bit more sleep. Whereas a Pitta person, maybe 30 minutes before, and a Kapha person before sunrise would be a good time to wake up. Just so that you can kind of see how that looks, constitutionally. So at this point, if you like, say a prayer before rising of thanks for a new day. My teacher, Dr. Ladd, would say, look at your hands and give thanks to Mother Earth. And I like to share with my students and clients that, sometimes you might wake up and just really not feel well or feel concerned about something. And in those moments, it can feel hard to have gratitude, right? So what I usually recommend is just try to find gratitude for something. I'm grateful that I'm simply alive, something like that. Or I'm grateful that I can see the sun right now. I'm grateful that I can hear the birds outside. And that's enough. It doesn't have to be some big thing. It can be something very simple. After that, head into the bathroom and splash your face and eyes with cool water or flower water. And what I mean by flower water is like rose water, or hydrosol is really nice for washing the eyes. But you can simply just splash water, and this wakes up the body, wakes up the mind. It's a nice way to start. Then we get into cleaning the mouth. So tongue scraper, you can see in this picture, we have a metal tongue scraper. Metal tongue scraper is ideal. If you have a plastic one, you can use that. If you have nothing, you can actually use the back of a butter knife. My teacher used to always tell us, but these tongue scrapers are super available in most health food stores. So you scrape your tongue back to front, sticking your tongue all the way out, 7 to 14 times. Be gentle. This is not a deep thing. Be very gentle with your delicate tongue. And then you rinse your mouth. So this removes the toxins from your mouth, it freshens your breath, and it stimulates the organs. And then you can swish with oil. Again, these things are optional. I actually consider the mouth cleaning to be like something everyone should do. If you want to swish with oil, there's something called oil pulling. You've probably heard of by now. Traditionally, sesame oil was used for up to 20 minutes. I know that's a long time, so you can start out with a lesser amount of time. Coconut oil is really nice too because it's great for oral health. So some oil pulling. If you don't like oil, you can just do like a mouthwash kind of rinse, a natural mouthwash. And then at that point, it's good timing to head into the kitchen, warm up some water, because we always want our water to be either room temperature or warm, but especially in the morning, warm flushes the GI tract and the kidneys. And it will often promote a bowel movement, which you want to promote at this time of day. And then you can sit for a bowel movement. This little stool here is called the Apana stool. This is a stool that you can put your feet on. If you're trying to encourage regularity in your life, which is really important, and you don't actually have to go, you can still sit down and try to encourage this. And after a time, your body becomes trained. And then nasya, which is nasal administration of medicine, but we recommend medicinal oils usually because it's very universal. It's good for pretty much everybody. So you can use plain sesame oil. You can use a specific oil formulated for this purpose, which will be called nasya oil. You can use warm ghee. And so you administer that into your nasal passages, sniff, do a little massage of the nasal passages, and it really helps, especially if you have allergies happening. If you don't tend to get hungry right away, this is a good place to put a morning drink, elixir, tea, coffee, whatever it is that you drink. And we won't get into like what's good for who today, but we'll do that in a couple of weeks during the intensive. And then this is a perfect time for a practice called Abhyanga. And Abhyanga is oil massage. It's something that you can receive from a therapist, but it's also something that you can do on yourself. And it's something that Ayurveda recommends Most people, with very few exceptions, do, and you can do this even on a daily basis. So you apply lots of oil very lovingly into your body, and then after the oil massage, you take a hot shower or bath. And that timing, the Abhyanga first and the hot shower or bath afterwards, is important. So this is ideal to do at least 3 times a week, and especially at the junction between seasons. You can do it daily. So if you can't fit this in here in the morning, you can do it as part of a pre-bedtime routine. Abhyanga is one of Ayurveda's magical rejuvenators. It keeps you young and reduces pain. And now you can get dressed after your shower. And we recommend natural fibers. This is a nice place to have a practice. So even 5 minutes of practice is wonderful. You can do a little bit of yoga, move your body, pranayama, which is breathing practice, and some meditation. So only 5 minutes if that's what you have. And if you have more time, you can do 15, 20, even an hour at this time of day on an empty stomach is the key point here. And then exercise per your constitution and your current imbalance in the season. And again, you know, this might not all be happening every day, but I'm just giving you an idea, like the order of things that tends to work really well. So some exercise here is good on the days that you'll be having exercise. And then I always want to say after that, remember to hydrate. I just want to quickly say that the best time to hydrate is not with your meal or right before or right after, because it dilutes your digestive enzymes. So hydrating between meals is the best time, okay? So hydrating after exercise, of course. And then this is a good time for breakfast. Ayurveda does recommend breakfast as an important meal, even though occasional fasting can be an important health practice. So, you know, we have this practice that a lot of people are doing called intermittent fasting, where they don't take breakfast. At times, that might be appropriate. Again, it's very individual, depends on what's going on with you. But Ayurveda really tends to recommend that most of the food be taken at breakfast and lunch. Those are like the most important meals of the day. Then, of course, this is your time, your work time, your project time, your childcare time, whatever it is that you do in your life, other than taking care of yourself and doing practices, that's when this can happen. And then the most important meal of the day, which is lunch. And the ideal time for lunch is between noon and 2. And it's the time to eat the largest and heaviest. It's also the best time to have things like meat or raw vegetables, which are more difficult to digest if you tend to eat those things. Digestive fire is strongest between noon and 2, and that's why. So again, following the sun is highest at those times, and so digestive fire mirrors that. After lunch, Ayurveda recommends that you lie on your left side for 10 minutes and then take a short walk. Of course, you know, there'll be times when you don't have time to do those things, but it's good to know that that's a recommendation that's supportive to health. And then again, more time for your life in here comes after that. Again, remember to hydrate. And then we have afternoon time, which is another wonderful time for practice. Yoga Nidra is one of my top recommendations for most people, because most people tend to be somewhat stressed in their lives. You know, maybe they don't get enough rest and relaxation, especially if you don't sleep well at night. Yoga Nidra is a wonderful practice. It's something that you can simply purchase or find online, a recorded track, and be led through this practice where you lie down, like you see in the picture, with your eyes closed, and experience a rotation of consciousness that's very deeply restful. So if you don't have enough time for a practice at this time of day, then a little bit of breathing, maybe even just closing your eyes for 30 seconds, a minute, and just coming back to yourself. You can do feet up, eyes closed. That's one of my favorites for busy people, or simply just take some time to have a cup of tea. Big fan of tea time, because tea time, again, is a signal to yourself, okay, I'm taking this time for myself, even if it's just a few minutes, and rest, reflect, and kind of sort out what I'm doing with the rest of my day. Then dinner time. The ideal time for dinner is before sunset or at least 2 to 3 hours before bed, because you want to be able to digest pretty well before you lie down. 5 to 7 is usually a good time frame. And of course, how much before sunset really depends on the season. A pre-bed routine is really wonderful. So this is a winding down routine that prepares you for sleep. You may have experienced, that if you kind of just go, and then get on the computer for 2 hours and then you try to go to sleep, it's more difficult to sleep. So having a winding down routine is really helpful with this. You can do the Abhyanga that we talked about. You can take an aromatherapy bath, which, from my perspective is just a bath with some essential oils that help you calm down. So a little meditation time is good here. A worry journal, and that's simply unburdening yourself by writing it all down so that you don't have to sit and worry about it all night. Uplifting or spiritual reading or an audiobook is a nice thing to put in this spot, but do avoid work and screens 1 to 2 hours before bed for a restful night's sleep. And then this is, of course, where you can take any pre-bed tonics, golden milk, milk tonics, which are often recommended by Ayurveda, any sleep supporters, and then ideally bedtime by 10, maybe 10:30. And again, this is seasonal, and it can also be according to constitution. But 10 o'clock is a perfect time because if you're not in bed by 10, this is a Pitta time of day and the mind tends to turn on and get really creative. And after that, it gets harder and harder to go to sleep unless you're really exhausted. So by 10 is an excellent time. So what about if you have different schedules in your life on different days? This is a question that I get a lot. Most of us don't have the same responsibilities each day, so we have to vary our schedule, and keeping the same schedule every day is just not possible. So you could, for example, have a Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule, and then a separate schedule that's Tuesday, Thursdays, and then a weekend schedule. Ideally, the sleeping and waking times and the meal times would be pretty similar. Those are the important things to try to keep at the same time, but the other elements of the day may really change, and that's just fine. The body actually benefits from some variation. So the science actually shows us that changing things up can have great benefit for the body and the metabolism in particular. So we don't want to just totally settle into like always the same thing, right? But a rhythm, a natural rhythm is what we're looking for. So what about creativity and spontaneity? This is another one of the like classic questions that I get, because a lot of people love waking up and spontaneously creating their day. I feel like creativity comes in creating your Dinacharya. That's one place you can implement creativity. And you can also keep blocks of time during the day where you get to choose based on how you feel in the moment. So you might do that morning routine that I talked about, and then have breakfast, and then it's open. You get to decide, what will I do first? Especially if you're working from home, like, well, maybe I'll do this first, maybe I'll do that first. And that's where creativity and spontaneity can come in. Then lunch is set, more time for that, afterward, right? So hopefully that makes sense. You can still have that feeling of creating your day if that's something that's near and dear to your heart. Okay, so that is my intro on Dinacharya. I hope that gives you an idea of how you can work with Dinacharya. And on May 13th, I'll be doing an intensive with Lagras, and I'd love to have you join me. It's going to be 2 hours, and I'll teach you more about each practice that I've mentioned here, and I'll add a couple more that I haven't mentioned yet. And I'll also get you creating your own Dinacharya so that ideally you'll walk away with at least a draft, if not something like that feels ready to go, that you can start working with right away. Alrighty, so I hope you'll join me at that time. And if there are any questions, please feel free to ask.
Maybe you can unscreen share, Sunny, and we'll
Yeah, thanks for the reminder.
for sure. Yeah, I know it's easy to. And I was just posting for everyone both Sunny's website URL, and then also the Zoom registration for any of you that would like to take her intensive. It's a 2-hour intensive, as she said, May 13th. and 5 to 7 Eastern Standard Time. And during that time, Sunny, will they also have a chance to understand a little bit better what their Ayurvedic constitution is so that they can tailor a bit more their Dinacharya?
I will talk about that. I won't be able to look at each person, so I won't be able to like necessarily give you, what I think, but I'll give you some cues that can help you get a feeling for what's going on. And it's easier to get a feeling actually for the current state of imbalance, and that's fine. We can work with the current state of imbalance actually really well because even if we only know the current state of imbalance, for example, vata being high, which I was talking about, that'll be wonderful to bring in elements that balance vata, even if we don't know, the birth constitution.
Good. And, just maybe Vladimir, you could bring everybody over as co-hosts so that it's easy for them to be seen and to also ask questions and make it a little personal. But while he's doing that, just a couple comments and questions. So I'm wondering, this last year and a half has been so very unusual for everybody with the COVID lockdown and isolation and stress and worry. How have you adjusted, just in general, your clients' dinacharyas to try to accommodate some of these nuances or really pretty significant new scenarios that COVID has brought?
Mhm. I've noticed that people have been a lot more overwhelmed. So it's kind of perfect that I was already talking about vata because vata has been particularly high in the collective consciousness, right? Worry, fear,
Yeah.
anxiety, massive change. And those all are related to vata. So they increase vata. So what I've found that I needed to do is to just help people simplify, actually do less and focus on some really specific practices. And I've been doing a lot with actually breath work, pranayama, we call it in Ayurveda and yogic practice, because tuning into the breath really allows us to feel connected to our parasympathetic nervous system, which helps us to relax. And it takes us into a meditation state. When the mind is really busy and worried and anxious, it's hard to just sit down and go, okay, I'm meditating now,
Mhm.
unless you have, a long practice and ways to access meditation. But for those who don't already have that, to sit down and say, well, I think I'll meditate now without a specific practice is challenging because the mind just goes all over
Sure.
the place, right?
Yeah.
So doing breathing practice really entrains the mind and settles the body and settles the nervous system. So we've been doing a lot of that. I've also noticed, because I lead cleanses, I've noticed that it's more challenging for people to kind of drop into something that's more sort of committed and takes a lot more steps. So I've really just kind of backed off and been offering much simpler ways to engage with Ayurvedic practices in daily life and, not make it too complicated. So that's simplifying is really the biggest thing.
Perfect. Perfect. And I see maybe they're having some problems. Oh, you can't make them co-host is why. Let me just, I see Shipla here. Shipla, if I'm going to make everybody, I guess I have to do it, co-host so that you can open your mic and ask, and your video if you'd like, but please please stay muted until you have a question. And Dolan and I guess Shipla. Shipla, I saw that you had a question in the chat box. Do you want to, and you are unmuted. Do you want to ask Sunny your question? Maybe we can't hear her. So just give me a second here because Vladimir can't make them co-hosts. Okay,
Um,
is that
she's saying, "Can you hear me?" I no, I can't hear you.
Shipla? Okay, let me just read her question here in the chat box. Are there any special Dinacharya tips for pre-teenagers?
Wow, well, that's an interesting question. Children of all ages benefit from Dinacharya, and in that case, a lot of times we have to talk to them about, what they're interested in doing. They have to, of course, buy in to what they're going to be practicing, or it won't happen, right? So the specific tips, I would say, at that age, it's really more about regular eating schedule and regular sleeping schedule than anything else. If that's something that they can implement, then they could do practices like, sitting down for 2 minutes or 5 minutes and do some breathing. They can do Abhyanga. As long as they're interested in the practices, I find that they work really, really well. Abhyanga, the oil massage, is wonderful for, especially if there's anxiousness, worry in the children, either you applying it for them, or at a preteen age, they probably want to apply it themselves. Putting oil on is an amazing way to just ground them. So it really depends on their individual proclivities and what they're interested in, but getting them to eat and sleep at regular times is a big enough project for a lot of kids.
Sure. Good. So I'm just going to read these because I see some do not have video and some do not have audio. Maurice is asking, what about vaccination from Ayurvedic viewpoint?
That's a pretty loaded question.
Yes, it's a
And
question
we
of the
didn't
day.
have vaccinations. They didn't have vaccinations when the ancient texts were written. So of course we can't say exactly for sure what would be said there. I will tell you that Ayurveda says, anything that can't be digested properly by the body can be considered poison. So we could look at that as is this something that can be digested, and how does it get digested? I think that's probably about all I could say about the Ayurvedic viewpoint there.
So when your clients ask you for advice, because I know that you also your wisdom goes beyond just Ayurveda, is there any particular guidance that you tell them, or to just really find the right answer for themselves in terms of vaccination, COVID
In terms of
vaccination?
vaccination, what I usually recommend is, this is a very individual decision. I mean, very. So you always have to weigh the strength and the ramifications of the disease against the ramifications of receiving a vaccination. So, and it doesn't have to be an across the board decision. It can be based on each circumstance, each disease, each potential, and then each vaccine and what you know about it. That's usually what I recommend to people.
Yeah, good. And I know families where, maybe the husband will get vaccination and one or two of the siblings, but maybe not the mother. So, I think some people are primarily approaching it as individuals, even within the family.
Right. And I think that's a wonderful, wonderful way to look at it, because it is something that we need to actually look into. And,
Yeah.
is it right for this person? And if it's not, why? What are the factors involved that may not make it right for this person? And what are the factors that may actually make it right for this person? So I don't really believe in an across the board approach to anything, really.
Sure. Okay, and Eric, seems Dinacharya is quite structured and disciplined. One needs to follow a set of rules. Seems not very easy.
Right. So yeah,
I think that's a statement, but maybe it's a question. He's got a question mark after it.
yeah.
So
It can be very easy. And it's because your Dinacharya is created for you. So I gave you, here's an example Dinacharya. That these are kind of the classic practices that one would put into a Dinacharya, and that's what I presented. But maybe that doesn't work for you. Maybe your Dinacharya is as simple as, I wake up at a certain time, clean my mouth, have warm water, and then I don't do anything else specifically until maybe a pre-bed routine. And for you, that can be your Dinacharya. It doesn't have to be all these different things, right? So you do what works for you. And then there may come a time in your life where you say, I really want more. And then you add more, and that works for you at that time. So there is no set structure. If you look in a book, like if you look at our teacher, Radhe's and my teacher, Dr. Ladd, if you look in his book when he talks about Dinacharya, yes, you'll see this very long list, and it sounds like, wow, that would take all day. And it can if you want it to. But that's just sort of the general prescription, and then it has to be tailored to you. It's not, it can be structured and disciplined. sure, in certain ways, but again, it allows for whatever you need. So it's a living, breathing entity, in my opinion.
Good, good, thanks. Any other attendees? If you've got a question or comment or observation for Sunny, just unmute and you can show your video or not, and feel free to ask her. This is the time. She's got 15, 20 years of experience, so please take advantage of this opportunity to ask her any questions you might have on Ayurveda or specific to Dinacharya and or her intensive coming up.
I have a question, if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of bothered about this because cleansing of the tongue and looks like a little bit too much to do, because in the nature nobody cleans the tongue in the morning. The animals do not do it. So to say, somehow nature takes care of everything. So in Japanese culture, which I just wanted to put this question in front of you, in the morning they drink 2 glasses of water without brushing the teeth, without rinsing the mouth before, because they consider this to be the information for the system to know what is happening within the system, how system is to react, so to say. It builds up all the protection in accordance with that, what information was put through that. Those toxins went inside and they gave the information how immune system is to react and how it is to protect itself. What do you
Mm-hmm.
think about such approach? It's totally different in a way.
It is different. It sounds wonderful, actually. It makes a lot of sense to me intuitively. My teacher teaches that actually you don't want to take in the bacteria that have lived in the mouth overnight. And, that's interesting though. But what I would say is that you're not likely to get rid of all of the information and bacteria in your mouth simply by scraping your tongue and swishing. I think that there's probably still going to be plenty of information there, and then you take in the water. So, I could see that making a whole lot of sense. And I could also see like maybe not wanting quite the bacterial load pre-scraping. The other thing that's interesting about cleaning the tongue is when you stick your tongue out, according to Ayurveda, we can actually see all the organs on the tongue and we can see what's going on in the digestive tract. So it's also a self-diagnostic tool. If you stick your tongue all the way out and you have a little coating on the back of the tongue, which is very normal and natural, that's the colon area. And it's telling you my colon is still working on some things, but the rest of my tongue maybe is clean. And that's telling me, okay, things have cleared and digested properly. And it's really just the colon area that has some elimination to do. But if you wake up and you stick your tongue out and your tongue is completely coated, you might say to yourself, oh, I see what happened. I had a snack at 10:30 last night and my body wasn't able to deal with that over the course of sleep. So it's also a diagnostic tool.
I think too, Sunny, what you mentioned during your talk was that what happens when you scrape your tongue, and not severely, as you said, we're actually massaging the organs, because each part of the tongue represents a different organ. By doing that 3, 4, 5, 10 times, there's a light massaging that's happening. So it's another benefit that you get from scraping.
Yes, stimulating the organs gently is part of the practice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good point.
I think also like there is also like very good breathing techniques, like very good pranayamas that involve taking out the tongue and roaring like a lion. So when one is taking out the tongue, then there is an automatic breathing that's happening. So it's very good for that kind of system also. And I personally, I didn't know that I was doing this Dinacharya, but from our Indian culture, I come from an Indian culture background, like we kind of follow all these things, and maybe it's habit, like right from childhood, but all these things that we do, it kind of brings a great freshness. Like any morning when I don't clean my tongue, it gives me such a different metallic and heavy breath feeling compared to when I clean my tongue. So I think once one gets into those habits, not doing that would be feeling so uncomfortable that one knows that how much joyful it's and how much fresh it makes one feel. Like even that oil pulling, like I do it every day, and it has become such a part of the morning routine, like while I'm jogging in my house or something. Or that oil massaging, like if I don't massage and just go bath, then I can feel the difference. So it has been all inculcated, like in Indian culture, like so much as part of a routine that we didn't even know that this is a specific Dinacharya, and we just knew all the benefits that's happening. So I think it brings a different freshness and rejuvenation when we start doing all this.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And I've heard this from friends and other people from India as well, that Ayurveda is just integrated into the family life and culture there. And so it's like, yeah, maybe you don't know that we call it Dinacharya, but it's part of your life and it's part of your lifestyle, and you see the benefit of that. So thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else, any other attendees that have a question or would like to make a comment or observation?
Eric had another question.
Oh, do you see it down here?
Yeah, he says,
Oh.
so is the individual tailored Dinacharya based on a horoscope? Very interesting. That might be a question for Rade as a Vedic astrologer, but I would say yes, it certainly could be in a lot of ways. Like, for example, if we're looking at like, in terms of weekly Dinacharya means daily routine, but in terms of the weekly routine, you know, there might be a specific day that you fast that has to do with your horoscope. Am I right, Rade? Would you agree with that?
Yeah. I think where I've been able to integrate the two is, you know, you mentioned early on when you start to work with a client the very first time and start to co-create a Dinacharya that's fit for that client, you don't load on 7 or 8 or 10 items. It's one at a time. And in the chart, there is what I've done is looked at a particular area in the chart that has to do with one's ability to follow actually daily routines, to be very disciplined in a detailed, structured way. And so when I see that area of the chart very strong, then I'm much more comfortable giving them 4 or 5 and maybe not following up for a couple months, versus if that area of the chart is not so strong, then the 1 or the 2 and following up much more frequently. So that's one way. And the other way I would say is there is something in Ayurveda called Kavai Gunas, which are weak areas of the body that can be inherited, or it can be because of an accident that occurred. And by looking at the chart, even if the person's not aware, perhaps they feel very healthy and not aware of any particular weak organs in their body, you can see that area within the chart that's most likely to have problems, and when it'll be kind of at-risk periods. So you can also supplement that Dinacharya with, you know, additional herbal teas perhaps, or types of aromatherapy baths, or eating diet to support that. So there's a lot. I mean, this is just like you said, sister science of yoga and being able to integrate it. Yoga, Vastu, Jyotish, I mean, all these get integrated and can be used, in my mind, in setting a Dinacharya.
Absolutely. Wonderful.
Yeah.
I have another kind of question. Sorry to come back to it again, but it's kind of bothering me a bit. I can see that in all this approach, the conscious approach is the major one. So to say, when you become aware of the routine and discipline, you apply your mind, you apply your will, intention, and so on, it becomes very productive, so to say. Even if you do it not totally in a right way, if you do it in a right way, it's better. But if you do it in a wrong way, it will be the same effective or close to it. Yeah. So I think this is more about awareness, how we live our life. That's why they had ritualism in the past, that rituals were assigned to everyday life. From morning till evening, every day there's something to do with regard to the cosmos, devatas, offerings, and so on and so forth. The whole, universe around you has to be addressed and dealt with and interacted with. So that's where the Jyotisha comes into picture. And here, Dinacharya is the same idea of becoming aware of what is really going on and how are you going to use your will, your time, your consciousness. You may use it this way or that way. So choose. And by choosing, you determine your life as a conscious life. It changes.
Absolutely. I agree 100%.
Well, this is a discovery for me because
Well, and I think that Dinacharya and the whole approach in Ayurveda is about tuning in to your environment, the environment within, your environment without, and the universe at large. So this is how I believe Dinacharya came about. When is Pitta the highest? Well, like you said, Sunny, when the sun's the highest, when there's the most heat, there is a natural correlation or synchronization that's happening between us as an individual, our immediate environment, and the universe. And you may not be sensitive enough to realize that. So okay, a Dinacharya will help, but eventually, like I think Vladimir is suggesting, being able to more intuitively recognize that, and that being that awareness and intention is ultimately where you want to be, and not having to follow a set routine. But I think that's what Ayurveda tries to show, is how to be synchronistic with your environment and the universe.
Right. I mean, I talked about gunas, meaning qualities, at one point, and really I feel like that is Ayurveda right there, is being aware of the qualities from moment to moment, that moment to moment application of awareness to be aware of the qualities. And then in every moment you can respond. But for most of us, we need to start somewhere, right? And that's where Dinacharya, I think, creating one comes in. We have to just start somewhere.
Yeah, agreed. Good. Well, any other questions from our attendees, or comments from attendees? No?
There was
Or do
one
you
more.
see another one in there?
Yeah,
Not
Shilpa
following the
said,
chat. Somebody's not following the chat box.
that's okay. She said, do you have special techniques to practice within the Dinacharya to increase concentration or reducing distractions? I mean, I feel like the structure of the Dinacharya itself actually helps, but for me, I find that the breath work, the pranayama, and the meditation are those practices which really help us to focus the mind and kind of pull things in before we get pulled out into the daily life. But I really think all of the practices help. The Abhyanga you could see even that way, because it centers and calms the nervous system and brings vata down. And so then things aren't quite so distracting and all over the place. So really the entire structure and all the practices help us to focus.
Too, you mentioned, Sunny, the benefits of yoga nidra.
Mhm.
And I know your husband, Daniel, at least while I knew him at the Institute, he taught and instructed yoga nidra. And some people may or may not be familiar with it as a practice that can be incorporated as part of the Dinacharya. Could you explain a little bit more about what yoga nidra is and how one can benefit by including it daily or throughout the week in a Dinacharya?
Yeah, and I'll just say I'm not a yoga nidra teacher myself, but having practiced yoga nidra as a recipient and practitioner for many, many years, it's a wonderful way to, so many people can identify with that place that they can access right as they're falling asleep, that kind of, that place where you're not quite in the sleep, but you're not completely conscious. And another place I think a lot of people experience this is when they do yogasana and they lay down for shavasana at the end of the practice. A lot of times you'll find yourself in this kind of hovering awareness. Yoga nidra is a practice that takes us into that space. And it's, I think at its simplest, in its simplest form, it's a rotation of consciousness. And so we're applying the consciousness usually in part of the yoga nidra practice to various parts of the body. So like we're just becoming aware of the eyebrow or the nose or the chin, and we become aware of these different parts of the body. We become aware of different sensations in the body, and it entrains the consciousness to go to a place where we can deeply, deeply rest. It's said to be much more restful than deep sleep, deep sleep and REM sleep. And it takes us into a place also where we can work with a practice or an affirmation, which is called sankalpa in Sanskrit, and use the practice actually also to manifest what we're intending in our lives in any particular moment. So it's both a rest and kind of a manifestation practice. And it's wonderful for people who find themselves exhausted during the day. So like rather than taking a cup of caffeine in the afternoon, yoga nidra practice. Didn't sleep well, or having illness or under a lot of stress, yoga nidra practice. Most of the practices that you find kind of out in the world are like, intense exercise and do this and do that. And it's like a state of not doing, which I think we need more of, that place of doing less. I don't know if that's a very good description for you.
No, it was pretty, I have experienced it before, and I just totally agree with you. It's just a wonderful, wonderful practice of both focusing and then letting go and being in kind of that space of not even not doing, but just kind of an open awareness, I guess is how I would define it. But yeah, it's a great practice. And Maurice has also asked a question here, how to do Abhyanga and what kind of oil. I know that, don't know if that's a question you can, that's a big question here.
Yeah, it's a big question, and we will be going into that specifically on May 13th at the intensive. But I'll just say quickly, the simplest, most beneficial oil that most people can use is sesame oil. The only thing I'll say about sesame oil is it's heating. So if you tend to have heat, you're a hot constitution, then you would want to mix it with coconut oil. So you could just mix sesame and coconut. If you're not sure, mix sesame and coconut. There are herbalized oils, wonderful, deeply cooked herbal oils from the tradition of Ayurveda, but we can also keep it simple and go sesame and coconut. Make sure your oils are organic. That is essential. The body eats through the skin. It takes in medicine through the skin. So you want to make sure that that's as pure and organic as possible. And how to do it, I'll be talking about that. But basically, top to bottom, ears everywhere, feet even, you massage the oil in, you leave it on for maybe 10 minutes if you have that amount of time. You carefully get into the shower. If you've done the bottoms of your feet, you take a really warm shower, rinse it off. You don't need to soap it off. And then you get out, pat dry with a towel, and you're on your way to your day. And it's amazing.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Sunny. Really, really appreciated this. And again, anybody that might be interested in the intensive, Sunny will be showing you how to kind of tailor create a Dinacharya that works for your constitution, your lifestyle. It's a 2-hour on May 13th, and we'll be sending out a notice. It's 2 weeks from now, but we'll be sending out a notice before that to allow you to sign up, and it's $35. So great price for a ton of information from an expert in Ayurveda, and something that will make a big difference in your life if you can develop Dinacharya that fits your lifestyle, your constitution, and also live by it day to day. So please do consider. And Sunny, we just thank you so much again. It was a wonderful talk, and appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Namaste.